Graffiti what?
A few months ago, I picked up a game called Magic Pen Gel for PS2, and after playing it through, I felt like I had really discovered a charming little game about drawing your own creatures and setting them off to fight in little RPG battles. Soon after I played that game and I made a video about it for the channel though, loads of people in the comments were letting me know that there was a sequel also released for the PS2 that I'd never heard of. It was released a few years later and just happened to go by a different name. A little research and an eBay order later, and I got myself a copy of Graffiti Kingdom for my PlayStation 2. Graffiti Kingdom functions as a sequel to Magic Pen Gel, but it really just shares that monster drawing mechanic. At a quick glance though, it seems Graffiti Kingdom is the more popular of the two entries. And based on the comments in my own video, it seemed to be more well known. Garakuta Studio and Taito developed the game in Japan, but it was published by a few different people in other regions. I'm gonna probably refer to Magic Pen Gel throughout this video, so if you haven't seen my original video on the game, I would recommend going checking that out first. Either way, I'm pretty excited to talk about this one today, so let's just get straight into Graffiti Kingdom. Just like the first game, Graffiti Kingdom starts with a little cutscene explaining how the world works. Years ago, there was an evil devil tormenting the world before being stopped by a magical power they refer to as graffiti. Graffiti can create anything you can imagine and bring demons to life. Nowadays, the people of Canvas Kingdom have a pretty relaxed lifestyle. Their prince, Pixel, is a bit of a troublemaker and always seems to run off to explore the castle on his own accord. That is until one day, Pixel falls into a trapdoor that brings him to the seal at the bottom of the castle. He stumbles upon the magical staff, and being the person he is, immediately starts messing with it. The graffiti wand, as it's known, wakes up a nearby painting, which comes to life. These box dogs are sort of the studio's mascot, and they showed up in Magic Pen Gel as well, but this one talks.
This wand is the creator of graffiti, the graffiti wand. Okay.
This dog seems to be some sort of guardian of the wand and tries to teach Pixel how to use the thing. The prince manages to create a ball, but it soon bounces away and they accidentally awaken the devil, who is sealed nearby. Of course, the devil takes over the castle immediately, Prince Pixel gets thrown out, and the castle is turned into a giant heap of cardboard and scrap. The plot here is surprisingly different from the previous game, and it's more of just a whimsical adventure to go through. Unfortunately though, the cutscenes are pretty hampered by that PS2 era voiceover. The character dialogue tends to be really robotic for some reason, and the quality of the voice acting is sort of all over the place. I found that the rough voice acting and dialogue choices make the cutscenes a lot more funny in an unintentional way.
Oops, sorry!
I think at this point, this rough voice acting and direction is more of a charming aspect of games at this time, so I don't really mind it that much. But it did make me wonder if there are games now that have that sort of voice acting on purpose. It'd be some sort of weird nostalgic selling point. The devil actually spared Pixel and the dog for basically waking him back up, and they end up in a field outside of the castle. The dog introduces herself as Pastel, and the two of them have to form a sort of uneasy alliance in order to get back to the castle and set things right. Pastel will spend the rest of the game riding Pixel like a backpack. I actually really like how the two of them just kind of hate each other, and they do this throughout the entire game. Pixel is really just a bit of an idiot and doesn't seem to want anything to do with the situation. He's a dumb little kid that doesn't really care about what's going on. Even with the messy dialogue, it comes across in a way that works pretty well. Pastel teaches Pixel how to transform with the magic wand and these cards that you'll find throughout the game, and the two of them set off back toward the castle. Graffiti Kingdom is a pretty big departure from the turn-based combat of its predecessor. The Graffiti wand works with these sort of monster cards to give Pixel the ability to transform into any creature imaginable. You can attack the enemy demons to temporarily transform into them, or use your preset cards to transform into whatever you have saved. To be honest, I didn't fully understand how the system works, and I kinda skipped through the intro dialogue. But I can't say I wasn't having a good time just smacking the heck out of these things as a giant teddy bear. But of course, the main draw is that you can create whatever creature you want to play as yourself. The entire reason for Graffiti Kingdom existing is right here in the Graffiti notebook. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll probably know that I love me a good character creator. I think mechanics like this are always a good time, and being able to see your creative work displayed in the game is just always a treat. Even though my access to tools was pretty limited this early into the game, you already get a sense of how powerful the tools are here. It was honestly a little intimidating at first, but thankfully there's a surprisingly robust tutorial that can show you how each part of the character creator works. But in that complexity is a 3D modeling tool that's surprisingly advanced for the time it came out. To start off, you just draw any shape that you want as the main foundation of the body, and then every part you draw from there attaches to that main section. Once the piece is set, you can choose that part's color and function and do that until you have something you like. I think that with enough patience, you could make some really cool stuff. I noticed these hard edge shapes right away and got right to making a funny little robot guy. The best part though is that you have a way to choose your abilities and animations in a preview section afterward. I gave my robot a few swings and a kick, as well as a fitting animation set to match his jumbly look. I called him Toby. I was actually pretty surprised how well he turned out. He looks pretty silly and his face vanished in game for some reason, but I like him. His goofy little run looks great in motion, and it made me pretty excited to just jump back into the rest of the stage. Every level consists of platforming segments and combat arenas. Even though the game says Action RPG on the back of the box, I would pretty much say it's just as much a platformer. You have to fight stuff and level up while doing so, but you'll also be doing little platforming sections to get through each area. Combat though is incredibly simple, especially in this starting section. Each of the 4 face buttons are assigned actions depending on what you selected in the character menu, and the ones that are available can change depending on what form you take. If you gave yourself arms, you can set it up to have a right and left punch, or if you have legs, you can give yourself a kick. Moving around is a bit janky and stiff, but it isn't too surprising considering they had to make nearly anything a playable character. I think I had more trouble making certain jumps because of the camera more than anything else. It's a little bit too close to your character most of the time, and it swivels around in this weird way, where you can zoom in while looking straight, or zoom out while looking down. It's definitely a product of its time. When you take out these demons, they have a chance to drop some coins, which you can pick up to earn experience. Earn enough experience to level up, and you'll get some new abilities for the Graffiti notebook. There's a decent little gameplay loop here. You can fight the monsters to get the coins, to level up and make new monsters as you go through every stage. There's a chance that the demons will also drop a card instead, which you can use in the menu to become that demon whenever you want. In this first stage, you'll see some cool looking demons, but also some questionable ones. Eventually, I got to the end of the level and reached the first boss.
Look what I will unleash now!
It made sense that it was pretty easy, and I got through it in no time. I do like the boss designs though, especially how they turn into these ghosts and fly away when you defeat them. Pixel and Pastel finally get to the castle and run into Tablet. Of course, they follow that classic rival look that's just a cool version of the main guy. Tablet explains that you need to gather 3 keys to get into the main section of the castle in order to fight the devil. That leads you to the next stage and the first major area.
Can I ask you something? Aren't you worried it might be a trap?
Oh, if it's a trap, I'll just come back and beat the living out of you.
Well done. A terrible fate awaits those.
So I was using a backwards compatible PS3 to play all my games, but it looks like its time has finally come. I think the character creator might be the culprit because even my PS2 gets pretty noisy with that thing open. I had to restart the game on my PS2 with component cables instead, and hopefully it doesn't look too bad. The only big problem was that I lost my little robot guy. Nice knowing you, Toby. I make my way back to where I was, let's take a bit of time and talk about the art style. Graphically, Graffiti Kingdom looks just like a storybook. The stages all look like they were built out of everyday objects that you'd find in a kid's playroom. The first area reminded me the most of Yoshi's Story on 64, with all this exposed cardboard and that sort of thing. But later levels will start to add things like giant Lego bricks or sand castles. Honestly, with a name like Graffiti Kingdom, I never would have expected the game to look like a coloring book. Graffiti, as it's properly known, isn't really even in the game, and it's mostly just a localization thing. The game's original title, translated, goes a little bit more like Doodle Kingdom 2, Battle at the Demon King's Castle, which makes a lot more sense. It's kind of just a weird localization choice, and I don't really know why they did it that way, but I guess that's just how it is. I think that aesthetically, Graffiti Kingdom does look good, and it does its job well, but I do think that the original game had a bit more of a charming art style. In the time it took for me to get back to where I was, I spent more time with the character creator and tried to make something more detailed. It really started feeling like I got a grip on the controls and put together a few guys I was pretty happy with. Here's a few of my favorite graffiti creatures that I've made so far.
There's a happy tree, evergreen tree. He lives right there.
I also realized in this time that attacking enemies as Pixel gave you new abilities for the creator. I don't know if I missed something there, I probably did, but it's incredibly important to get these new abilities because your old attacks are eventually going to start getting pretty weak. A little further into Mount Here and There, you get into this volcano section, and I just kept dying here. It was pretty easy to just get beat up. You can technically just skip a lot of these parts, but I kept wanting to kill every demon and get as much experience as possible, but eventually I just gave up and moved on. Unlike in Canvas Plains, each level has 2 bosses instead of 1. In the previous section I had to fight this meathead demon, and here you fight a cowboy skeleton guy. Even if the bosses are a little bit janky, they're easy enough to get by, and you get to enjoy a few silly cutscenes.
Yeesh. It looks like we just came across a weirdo.
I consistently liked seeing every boss's arena though. They're all really themed to the characters, and they're weirdly pleasant areas to be in. With the cowboy Easel taken out, you're introduced to the second-in-command demon, Pallet. I gotta say though, that even if the gameplay feels a bit monotonous at times, these dumb little moments in the cutscenes kept me going.
Get all the others together, we ought to have ourselves one big barbecue!
Block Valley as a level doesn't really have that much going on, but I did like the change in scenery. It's too bad that as time goes on, Graffiti Kingdom kinda shows its hand. You just go through every world trying to level up and get new abilities for your favorite graffiti transformations. The level design tries to be a bit more interesting, with a few gimmicks to break up the monotony, but it always feels like they're just a bunch of disconnected objects instead of a cohesive level. I just run around as my silly French fry guy and collect experience to go do more of the fun part, which is making new designs. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that the drawing is by far the best aspect of Graffiti Kingdom. I could spend hours just getting lost in this character designer, plucking away at things and trying to create something that I was genuinely happy with. But it just feels hard to stop the feeling that there isn't a lot to do with these creatures after you've made them. Magic Pendule, the previous game, had a similar issue to this, but I felt like its plot was a bit more engaging, so I wasn't too hung up about it. The biggest draw for me at this point was just trying to find new skills to learn. This level does introduce some cool stuff like projectile enemies, so you can now make things like cannons or guns, and you can also learn some new movement abilities. I picked up this dash that is just amazing. It just sends you absolutely flying, and it's both useful and hilarious in action. I felt like I had enough experience with the modeling tools and decided to put together my little mascot. I think the Camobot's simple design really helps me recreate it in all these sort of creative games I've been playing. It's always kind of fun to see how they turn out. The Graffiti Notebook really is the heart and soul of this game, and I think I must have spent more time here than actually playing the game itself. Even though I was sort of just sleepwalking through the gameplay, I was having a lot of fun making stuff. Kinda had a false sense of security though, because when I got to the boss at Block Valley, I got absolutely slapped. This dude just flies all over the place, and at the same time there's these roulettes spinning that explode when they activate. I really couldn't understand what to do with this one, and I spent an embarrassing amount of time just trying to duck and dodge or block or just live. I don't know, like I couldn't do it. Eventually, I did realize that the best method was to run away and spam these sort of charge up explosion attacks that you get from these jellyfish just outside the boss door. I'm pretty sure that this electric charge thing is by far the most busted ability in the game. I would try to test out different monster designs, different abilities, but nothing would ever beat that electric charge attack, and I found myself just nuking anything that put up too much resistance. After Block Valley, you enter this sandcastle area, which leads to a rocket ship that you go to space with. I got to the 5th boss and I just zapped him like the rest of them.
How have you been?
Ugh! You are one weird guy.
Well, I will be seeing you then.
He's the devil's son.
What?
The more I played Graffiti Kingdom, the more I was invested in seeing these cutscenes to just see what happens. There's honestly a progression here where in my notes for the game as I was playing it, I would more and more just come to accept the cutscenes for what they are. And that's the best way I could put it. Tablet's voice acting is so monotone that it makes everything that they say so funny to me. It's mostly a dubbing issue, like I can't verify that the original voices are good, but they do sound better when I checked. I could probably fill this entire video with just weird out of context cutscenes from this game.
It's alright. You don't have to explain.
I actually really liked Bowling Road, which was the next level. The alleys are designed like a racetrack, and you recently at this time would get the wheel upgrade, which lets you put 2 and 2 together and make a car. It isn't mind-blowing game design or anything, but it is nice that they give you a reason to use the dash or the wheel functions and create some variety with it. The levels tend to be pretty linear, but it was nice to see some larger open-ended areas as opposed to most of the linear stuff we've been seeing so far. After the boss here, Pastel gets stolen away by some evil demon bird, and you're forced to go on without them. It doesn't really change anything, you just don't have Pastel riding on your back.
So long. No!
Huh. Well, whatever.
What do you mean, whatever?
Whoa, what ears?
One thing though that I have to complain about is that the later levels tend to have some pretty bad frame rate issues. It thankfully never got to be unplayable, but there were certainly some moments here. Hallett's Palace was a fun idea for a level where you have to go through each of these sections to activate the elevator in the main area. The only problem is that when you activate the switches, it's kind of hard to tell if you even did anything. I also found this weird sign face guy, which was interesting. The fight with Pallet is pretty simple, same idea, just spam that lightning, and it was over pretty soon. After the fight though, Pallet tries to take one last shot at Pixel, but Tablet takes the shot instead.
Tablet!
We're almost there. Let's go.
Whoa, now it's personal. After Tablet's sacrifice, Pixel and Pastel head toward the Devil's Castle now that they've got all 3 keys. I had nearly every tool at my disposal at this point in the Graffiti notebook, so I decided to try and make something as realistic as I could before the end of the game. You've got to remember though that these controls are incredibly limiting, so making anything with any sort of detail is a pretty laborious process. I decided to draw a semi-realistic elephant. I spent about half an hour doing it, and I just didn't feel like it was coming together, so I put a big laser gun on his back. Looks good. I really kept struggling to make things proper scaled in this game, and the elephant actually turned out way smaller than I intended. But I hope that it at least demonstrated the level of detail that you can put into your models. This is the final area, and it's a short little section that you have to get through to reach the final boss. There's a lot of strong demons here, and it can be pretty challenging with the platforming, but you can just steal the fly ability from these yellow guys and skip the vast majority of it. With the area being so open-ended, it seems like that's probably the point, but really, it's kind of weird that they let you just skip everything here. I could have spent some time doing the platforming sections and fighting the enemies more, but you just kind of get pelted by a ton of lasers by the end of it, so I figured flying was the way to go.
You make me wait too long, boy. I thought you had run away screaming with fear.
The final boss is, of course, the devil, and you have to get through multiple phases of this fight without dying. The first 2 phases aren't too bad, but you can get pretty messed up if you get caught in his ice breath. After that fight though, Tablet returns and betrays Pixel, stealing the wand and using it to power himself up, becoming the Demon King himself.
What?
But it's okay, Pastel has a few spares.
Put me down!
Can you believe it? Estelle! Well, okay. Time to find out who is the strongest.
The final fight is a gauntlet between 5 stages of Tablet in multiple forms. They transform into a bunch of different things, each with their own abilities. Honestly though, I don't know if I could get through this boss very easily if I didn't know how broken that lightning attack was. I think the boss could have been incredibly frustrating if I just had my regular attacks. I ended up being able to cheese it out by hiding behind this pole and just spamming the lightning. Turns out the zap hitboxes are so janky they can actually hit around these pillars. It's not impossible without the lightning attack, but I'm not going to judge you if you do the same thing I did. After you take out Tablet and reduce them back to their ghost form, it's the end of Graffiti Kingdom. I really enjoyed how Pixel just gives Tablet his body back with the understanding that he can just beat him back into submission if he decides to pull anything again. Meanwhile, Pastel slips away to go seal the demon once again. I probably should have mentioned it before, but Pastel is pretty clearly another graffitician, or however they call it, and she takes on this dog form even though she's a human as well. Pixel decides that he actually wants to keep Pastel around and prevents her from resealing the devil. He just gets away, and they accept this. I mean, maybe we shouldn't have let this actual child make the decisions here, but it's probably not worth overthinking. As is tradition with many PS2 RPGs, you get treated to this sweet little animation at the end of the game. The townfolk seem to accept the good demons, but it looks like Pallet is still around causing trouble. I think it's nice though, because the boss demons pretty clearly don't actually want to do anything bad. And it's nice to see that at the end, you get these little illustrations of them integrating into society. But after I finished Graffiti Kingdom, there were still a few things I wanted to show off here. The first being the Versus mode. It's nothing special really, but it gives you a way to rematch bosses you've already finished, or use your own designs to battle with a friend. The interesting thing though is that player 2 will get to run around as Pastel. It's pretty clear that the entire Versus mode is an afterthought, and as a human, you can't even do anything. It's probably fun for fans to just have a good afternoon messing around with, but that's as far as I would say it goes. Another thing worth mentioning are these collectible transformation cards. Like I mentioned before, you can transform into demons that you defeat when they drop a card, but there were also these collectible cards that were hidden in the levels. These hidden cards would be more special stuff like boss characters. There's a handful of fun and interesting ones I found, like this walking Taito logo, complete with a registered trademark. Forgive me if I mispronounce anything here, but you can also find a Reimu card from the Toho games as a transformation in Pallet's Palace. Zun, who created the Toho games, actually worked at Taito for a few years and was a programmer on Graffiti Kingdom. I'm not familiar with the Toho games in any capacity, but it is cool to see as an Easter egg. He also worked on Magic Pen Gel and put Reimu in that too, but I didn't know that when I played it. Speaking of Pengel though, you can also get a transformation card to play as the titular Pengel. There aren't many references to the first game in this one, other than this and a tiny little glimpse of the main characters, Zoe and Taro, in the final cutscene. And that brings us to the end of my time with Graffiti Kingdom. While frankly, I was a little concerned that Graffiti Kingdom would be too far of a departure from its prequel, it definitely grew on me as time went on. The drawing system with the notebook is way better than it was in the previous game, and it's pretty impressive considering when it was developed. I think Graffiti Kingdom is absolutely worth checking out if you enjoy creating your own characters in games, but if it wasn't for that, I probably couldn't say it's anything special. The story and the world just aren't as interesting, I found, as in Magic Pengel, and the combat is pretty unbalanced. I hate to keep comparing it to Pengel, but if you play that game or watched my video, you'll really see how different they are in the presentation. But then again, there's a visceral enjoyment to just running around as whatever you want and just hitting stuff and having a good time. At the end of the day, Graffiti Kingdom is a real treat to go through, and I generally had a good time. And I'm especially happy to add it to my channel's growing collection of niche games that nobody has heard of.
Well, whatever. Come on, Pesto, let's go!
Sure.
Thanks for sticking to the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed what you saw here and you want to support the channel just a little bit, you can throw me a like or a comment down below. I'd love to know what sorts of things you guys created if you've played this game before, and also if you have any other niche kind of cool games like this that you'd love to recommend, I'm all ears. Alright, so thanks for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.